Zara's claws scraped against the metal railing as she watched the latest group of fighters enter the arena below. The Galactic Combat Tournament had drawn warriors from across known space to the massive station orbiting Kepler 442b. As a member of the Thrixian Royal Guard and daughter of High Commander Vextar, she had seen countless battles, but today felt different. Her violet skin shimmered under the arena lights, and her 4 eyes tracked each movement in the preparation chambers. The Thrixians were known throughout the galaxy as the ultimate predators. Their species had evolved on a harsh world where only the strongest survived. They stood 8 feet tall, possessed incredible speed and strength, and their society was built around combat prowess and honor. What made Thrixians truly unique was their mating system. Each Thrixian had one perfect genetic match somewhere in the universe. When they encountered this person, their body would react with an unmistakable recognition. The bond was sacred, instant, and permanent. Most Thrixians spent their entire lives searching for their chosen one. Zara had given up hope long ago. At 28 cycles old, she had traveled to hundreds of worlds, met thousands of beings, and felt nothing. Her parents worried she might be one of the rare unbonded, doomed to live alone. She had thrown herself into military service instead, becoming one of the finest warriors in Thrixian history. "The human delegation has arrived," announced Captain Crix, her second in command. He pointed toward the far entrance where several beings in strange form-fitting suits emerged. Zara had heard of humans but never seen one. They were a young species from a distant arm of the galaxy, having only achieved interstellar travel 50 cycles ago. Most older civilizations dismissed them as primitive upstarts. Their homeworld was supposedly a death trap of extreme weather, dangerous predators, and natural disasters that would kill most galactic citizens within days. "Why would they send representatives to the tournament?" Zara asked. "This is for elite warriors only." "Intelligence reports say they defeated a Corvan raiding fleet last month," Crix replied, his mandibles clicking with skepticism. "Probably exaggerated stories to gain political favor." The Corvans were brutal pirates who terrorized the outer systems. They stood 12 feet tall, had armor-plated skin, and wielded weapons that could level city blocks. If humans had truly beaten them in combat, they deserved respect. But Zara found it hard to believe. She watched as the human delegation removed their helmets. They were much smaller than she expected, barely 6 feet tall with pale, soft-looking skin. Their bodies seemed fragile compared to the other species present. One caught her attention immediately. He moved with a fluid grace that reminded her of apex predators from her homeworld. His hair was dark, and his eyes were an unusual blue color that seemed to glow in the artificial lighting. Unlike his companions who appeared nervous or excited, he remained perfectly calm, studying his surroundings with the focus of a seasoned warrior. Something stirred in Zara's chest, but she dismissed it as curiosity. The tournament operated on a simple elimination system. Fighters faced opponents from different species in single combat using their preferred weapons and fighting styles. Death was not required, but yielding meant permanent elimination. The winner of each bracket advanced until only 8 remained, then 4, then 2, and finally one champion who would claim the Crystal of Victory and earn their species significant political influence in the Galactic Council. Zara wasn't competing. As a member of Royal Guard, she was here to observe potential threats and assess military capabilities of other species. Her analysis would help determine future Thrixian foreign policy and defense strategies. The opening ceremony began with traditional displays from each participating species. The Corvans smashed massive boulders with their bare hands. The telepathic Centauri demonstrated their ability to manipulate matter with their minds. The Cybernetic Nexus Collective showed their technological superiority through holographic displays. When the humans took their turn, they did something unexpected. Instead of displaying raw power or advanced technology, they performed what their representative called martial arts. The movements were precise, controlled, and surprisingly beautiful. They showed techniques for fighting multiple opponents, disarming enemies, and using an opponent's strength against them. The crowd was polite but unimpressed. What they saw looked more like dancing than combat training. Zara found herself leaning forward, however, recognizing something others missed. Every movement had a purpose. Every stance created multiple options for attack or defense. It was sophisticated combat theory disguised as artistic expression. The human fighter she had noticed earlier performed last. He moved through a complex series of movements without weapons, then repeated the same sequence while wielding various tools that seemed designed for purposes other than fighting. A farming implement became a staff weapon. A length of rope transformed into a restraining device. Even simple eating utensils were incorporated into deadly striking techniques. When he finished, the arena fell silent. Then someone in the crowd laughed and others joined in. The display appeared to confirm that humans were primitive beings who had to improvise weapons from farming tools because they lacked proper military technology. Zara did not laugh. She recognized what she had witnessed. The human hadn't been showing off combat techniques. He had been demonstrating adaptability. His performance proved that humans could turn anything into a weapon and find solutions no matter how limited their resources. The first day of actual combat began the following morning. Zara positioned herself in the royal observation box to watch the proceedings. Each match was broadcast throughout the galaxy, serving as both entertainment and military intelligence gathering. The early matches proceeded as expected. Larger, stronger species dominated through raw power. The Corvins crushed their opponents with brute force. The Zentauri used telepathic abilities to confuse and disorient enemies before striking with energy weapons. The Nexus fighters employed advanced technology and cybernetic enhancements to gain decisive advantages. Then the humans began their fights. The first human matched against a Corvin warrior lasted exactly 47 seconds. Everyone expected a quick, brutal defeat. Instead, the human did something no one had seen before. As the massive Corvin charged forward with a war cry that shook the arena walls, the human simply stepped aside at the last possible moment and struck a specific point on the alien's neck. The Corvin collapsed instantly, completely unconscious. The crowd erupted in confusion. Healers rushed to examine the fallen warrior, confirming he was alive but would remain unconscious for several hours. The human had won without causing permanent injury, using minimal force and no weapons. "How is that possible?" Crix asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Zara studied footage of the strike, watching it replay in slow motion. "He hit a nerve cluster," she realized. Somehow he knew exactly where to strike to disable a Corvin nervous system. "But Corvin anatomy is classified military information," Crix protested. "How could a primitive species know our allies' biological weaknesses?" That was an excellent question. Either human intelligence capabilities were far more advanced than anyone realized, or they possessed an intuitive understanding of biology that allowed them to identify vulnerabilities in unknown species. The second human fight was even more impressive. Facing a Zentauri warrior known for telepathic manipulation, the human closed his eyes and relied entirely on hearing and movement to track his opponent. When the Zentauri attempted to project false sensory information, the human was unaffected because he wasn't depending on sight. The third human used what appeared to be a simple rope to defeat a heavily armed Nexus cyborg, somehow entangling the advanced machinery in ways that caused multiple system failures. By the end of the first day, all 5 human fighters had advanced to the next round. More importantly, each had demonstrated combat principles that challenged conventional military thinking throughout the galaxy. That evening, Zara found herself walking through the station's observation decks, unable to stop thinking about what she had witnessed. The humans fought like nothing she had ever seen. They were smaller, weaker, and less technologically advanced than their opponents, yet they won through pure tactical superiority. She discovered one of the human fighters standing alone on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. It was the same one who had performed the martial arts demonstration. Up close, she could see scars on his hands and arms that spoke of extensive combat experience. "Impressive fighting today," she said, approaching carefully. Most species found Thrixians intimidating, and she didn't want to startle him. He turned and looked up at her with those unusual blue eyes. When their gazes met, Zara's world changed forever. The recognition hit her like a physical blow. Every cell in her body suddenly sang with perfect harmony. Her heart began beating in synchronization for the first time in her life. The air itself seemed to shimmer with new colors and scents she had never experienced. This was impossible. Thrixian bonding only occurred between members of the same species. The genetic compatibility required was so specific that even closely related alien species never triggered the response. Yet every instinct she possessed was screaming that this human male was her chosen mate. The human's reaction was different but equally profound. His pupils dilated and his breathing changed. He stepped closer, drawn by some instinct he couldn't name. "I know you," he said quietly, though they had never met. "I've been dreaming about violet eyes for months. I thought I was losing my mind." Zara struggled to maintain her composure. Royal guards were trained to control their emotions in any situation, but the bonding response was overwhelming her rational mind. She had to leave before she did something that would cause a diplomatic incident. "Good luck in tomorrow's fights," she managed to say, then turned and walked away as quickly as dignity allowed. Behind her, the human called out, "Wait! What's your name?" She didn't answer. She couldn't answer. Everything she thought she knew about the universe had just been shattered by a chance encounter with a member of an alien species that shouldn't even register on her biological sensors. Back in her quarters, Zara paced frantically while trying to understand what had happened. She contacted the ship's medical officer and requested a complete biological scan, claiming she felt unwell after exposure to alien pathogens in the arena. The results were conclusive. Her hormone levels indicated a full mating bond response. Her genetic markers were all activated. According to every medical test available, she had found her perfect biological match in a human. This was unprecedented in Thrixian history. It challenged everything her species believed about genetics, evolution, and the sacred nature of the bonding process. If word of this reached her superiors, it would cause a scandal that could end her military career and shame her family's honor. But more than that, she was terrified by how right it felt. When she looked at the human fighter, every instinct told her she had found where she belonged. The logical part of her mind insisted this was impossible, but her body knew the truth with absolute certainty. Tomorrow, she would have to watch him fight again, knowing that her mate was risking his life in the arena while she remained powerless to help him. The second day of competition dawned with an announcement that changed everything. High Commander Vextar, Zara's father, had decided to enter a Thrixian representative in the tournament. Due to last-minute political negotiations, they needed someone to demonstrate Thrixian military superiority to the assembled galactic delegates. "You will compete," he informed Zara during their private meeting. "The Council has expressed concerns about human combat capabilities after yesterday's matches. We must show that Thrixian warriors remain the galaxy's finest." Zara's blood turned cold. "Father, surely Captain Crix or Commander Thane would be more appropriate choices. I am here as an observer, not a competitor." "The decision is made," Vextar replied firmly. "Your combat record is flawless, and your tactical knowledge surpasses any warrior in our fleet. You will face whatever opponent the tournament system assigns, and you will win decisively." The tournament computer operated on a random selection algorithm designed to ensure fair matchups across different rounds. Zara's entry was processed immediately, and her first opponent was selected from the remaining human fighters. It was him, Marcus Chen, according to the official records, age 28 Earth years, which roughly corresponded to her own age. Military background with something called Special Forces, though the details were classified. Born on a continent called Asia on the human homeworld. Standing in her private armory, Zara selected her traditional weapons with trembling hands. A curved blade forged from Thrixian steel that could cut through most known materials, throwing discs designed for precision strikes at multiple targets. Light armor that offered protection while preserving mobility. She had fought in dozens of campaigns across the galaxy. She had faced enemies twice her size, warriors with advanced technology, and creatures that existed only in nightmares. None of that had prepared her for the prospect of fighting her destined mate in single combat before an audience of billions. The armory door chimed, and Captain Crix entered. "Commander, the tournament officials require both fighters to meet before the match for standard briefing procedures." Zara closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Thrixian meditation techniques helped warriors find calm before battle, but today they felt inadequate. The mating bond was interfering with her normal emotional control systems, making her hyper-aware of Marcus's presence, even when he wasn't in the room. The briefing chamber was a neutral space where opponents could discuss rules, review safety protocols, and make any formal declarations. Most fighters used it for psychological warfare, attempting to intimidate their opponents or gain tactical advantages through conversation. Marcus was already waiting when she arrived. He had changed into simple fighting clothes that seemed designed for maximum mobility rather than protection. No armor, minimal equipment, just flexible fabric and sturdy boots. He looked impossibly small compared to her 8-foot frame and natural weapons. But when he looked at her, those blue eyes held no fear at all. "Zara," he said simply. Somehow he had learned her name. "Human," she replied, struggling to keep her voice steady. "Marcus," he corrected gently. "And you know we have a problem." Tournament officials were monitoring their conversation, so they had to be careful. But he was right. The mating bond was affecting both of them in ways that would be obvious to anyone paying attention. Her hearts were beating rapidly, her skin was flushed, and her scent was probably broadcasting her emotional state to anyone with sensitive olfactory organs. "I do not know what you mean," she said formally. Marcus stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I haven't been able to sleep since yesterday. Every time I close my eyes, I see your face. My body is reacting to you in ways I've never experienced. I think you're feeling something similar." The tournament official, a bureaucratic Zentauri, cleared his throat impatiently. "Fighters, please review the combat parameters. Victory conditions are submission, unconsciousness, or voluntary yield. Lethal force is permitted but discouraged. Medical teams are standing by. Do you have any questions about the rules?" "No," Zara said quickly. "Just one," Marcus replied. "Is there any way to declare the match a draw?" "Absolutely not," the official responded. "The tournament format requires a clear winner in each bout." Marcus nodded sadly. "Then we understand the situation." They were escorted to separate preparation chambers to await their match. Zara used the time to run combat simulations in her mind, analyzing everything she had observed about human fighting techniques. Marcus was fast, but she was faster. He was intelligent, but she had decades of tactical training. He was adaptable, but she knew her own capabilities better than he could know his. The logical conclusion was that she would win easily. Thrixians were simply superior warriors by every measurable standard. The problem was that her emotions were no longer operating on logic. The arena was packed beyond capacity. Word had spread about the mysterious human fighters, and everyone wanted to see how they would perform against one of the galaxy's most feared predator species. Betting pools had been established on every civilized world, with odds heavily favoring the Thrixian. As they entered the arena from opposite sides, Zara forced herself to focus on her training. This was just another opponent. She would win quickly and cleanly, with minimal injury to Marcus. Then she could figure out what to do about the impossible situation the universe had created. Marcus walked to the center of the arena with that same fluid grace she had noticed before. He carried no visible weapons, wearing only those simple fighting clothes. When they reached the traditional distance for formal combat, he bowed slightly in what she recognized as a human gesture of respect. "I want you to know," he said quietly, speaking only to her, "that whatever happens here doesn't change what I felt yesterday. When this is over, we need to talk." "Begin combat," announced the arena's automated system. Zara moved first, drawing her blade and closing the distance with Thrixian speed. Her opening strike was designed to end the fight immediately, a precise thrust toward Marcus's center mass that would penetrate his defenses before he could react. Marcus was no longer there. Somehow he had moved aside with impossible timing, avoiding her blade by mere inches. Before she could recover, he struck her wrist with surgical precision, targeting the nerve cluster that controlled her grip. Her sword clattered to the ground. The crowd gasped. No one had ever disarmed a Thrixian warrior so easily. Zara adapted instantly, switching to her secondary weapon. The throwing discs were designed for ranged combat, but they could be devastating in close quarters if wielded properly. She spun, lashing out with one disc while drawing the second. Marcus caught her wrist in mid-strike, using her own momentum to redirect the attack. They ended up pressed together for a moment, and the physical contact sent shockwaves through Zara's nervous system. The mating bond response was so intense she nearly collapsed. Marcus seemed equally affected, his breathing harsh and his pupils fully dilated. For a heartbeat, they remained frozen, staring at each other while the arena waited for the next exchange. Then Marcus stepped back and shook his head, as if clearing away a fog. "Focus," he murmured, though it was unclear whether he was speaking to her or himself. The fight resumed with increased intensity. Zara pressed her natural advantages, using her superior reach and strength to control the engagement. But every attack met empty air as Marcus flowed around her strikes like water. His movement patterns defied prediction, incorporating elements she recognized from his demonstration but adapted to counter her specific fighting style. More troubling was his knowledge of her anatomy. When Marcus did strike, he targeted nerve clusters and pressure points with the precision of a Thrixian field medic. Somehow this human had learned their biological weaknesses in detail, information that should have been impossible for him to obtain. As the match continued, Zara realized she was in serious trouble. Marcus wasn't trying to hurt her. Every strike was calculated to disable or control rather than cause injury. He was fighting to win while simultaneously protecting her from harm, showing a level of restraint that spoke to incredible skill and self-control. The crowd began to murmur as the fight extended beyond what anyone had expected. Thrixian victories were typically swift and decisive. Seeing one of their premier warriors unable to defeat a human quickly was causing widespread shock and concern. Zara attempted to end the stalemate with her most advanced technique, a spinning attack pattern that created multiple simultaneous threats from different angles. It was nearly impossible to counter without suffering at least partial damage. Marcus did something she had never seen before. Instead of trying to avoid the attack, he moved toward it, timing his approach so that he passed through the pattern during the brief moment when her blades were furthest from his position. He ended up behind her, close enough to whisper in her ear. "Your father is watching," he said softly. "I won't embarrass you in front of him." Then Marcus deliberately stepped into the path of her recovery strike, allowing her blade to pierce his shoulder. Blood flowed down his arm as he staggered backward, and the arena erupted in cheers. But Zara knew the truth. He had let her wound him. The injury was precisely placed to look serious while avoiding any vital structures. Marcus had thrown the match to preserve her honor and reputation. "Winner, Zara of the Thrixian Royal Guard," announced the arena system. Medical teams rushed to treat Marcus's wound while Zara stood frozen in shock. She had won, but it felt like the greatest defeat of her life. Her mate had sacrificed his own advancement in the tournament to protect her standing among her people. As Marcus was carried away on a medical stretcher, he caught her eye one last time. The message in his gaze was clear. They needed to talk, and it couldn't wait much longer. That evening, Zara used her security clearance to access the medical bay where Marcus was being treated. She found him alone in a private room, his shoulder properly bandaged, but his expression alert and determined. "That was unnecessary," she said without preamble. "Was it?" Marcus replied. "You think I didn't notice your father in the royal box? You think I don't understand what it would have meant for his daughter to lose to a human in front of the entire galaxy?" Zara moved closer to his bedside, still struggling with the intensity of the mating bond. Being near him felt like standing next to a fire, simultaneously comforting and overwhelming. "You do not understand our customs," she said. "Combat is sacred. By allowing me to wound you, you have complicated things." "Complicated how?" Marcus asked, sitting up straighter. "In Thrixian tradition, when one warrior deliberately takes injury to preserve another's honor, it creates a debt of obligation. I now owe you a life debt that can only be repaid through service or—" She paused, unable to finish the sentence. "Or what?" Marcus pressed. Zara looked away, her violet skin darkening with embarrassment. "Or through the claiming bond, if certain other conditions are met." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When she finally looked back at him, his expression had changed to something she couldn't quite read. "What other conditions?" he asked, careful. The conversation that followed changed both their lives forever. Marcus listened intently as Zara explained the Thrixian mating bond, her scientific training warring with emotions she could barely control. She described the genetic markers, the biological responses, and the sacred nature of the connection that was supposed to exist only between members of her species. "On my world," Marcus said when she finished, "we have stories about soulmates, people who are destined to find each other across impossible odds. Most humans think they're just fairy tales, but—" He paused, studying her face. "I've been having dreams about you for months before I ever knew aliens existed." "That is impossible," Zara protested. "Humans have only had interstellar contact for 50 cycles. Your species should have no knowledge of mine." Marcus smiled, and the expression transformed his entire face. "Humans are very good at impossible things. It's kind of our specialty." Before Zara could respond, the medical bay door chimed. Captain Crix entered, followed by 2 human males she recognized from the fighting delegation. Both groups stopped short when they realized they had interrupted something significant. "Commander," Crix said carefully, "your father has requested your immediate presence. The tournament situation has become complicated." One of the humans, introduced as Colonel Harrison, looked between Marcus and Zara with growing understanding. "So that's why you threw the fight," he said to Marcus. "Command is going to have some very pointed questions about your performance." "Let them ask," Marcus replied. "Some things are more important than military advancement." The 4 of them made their way to the administrative center where High Commander Vextar was meeting with human leadership. Through the conference room's transparent walls, Zara could see heated discussions taking place between multiple species representatives. "The situation has escalated beyond the tournament," Captain Crix explained as they walked. "Intelligence reports suggest the Corvin Empire is planning a major offensive against the outer colonies. They're using the tournament as cover for military reconnaissance." Colonel Harrison nodded grimly. We've detected Corvin spy ships conducting detailed scans of every species' fighting capabilities. They're building tactical profiles for future conflicts. Which means, Zara realized, they now know that humans can defeat their warriors in individual combat. Exactly, Crix confirmed. Your father believes this makes humanity a priority target for Corvin aggression. They cannot allow word of human combat effectiveness to spread. The implications were staggering. The Corvin Empire controlled vast swaths of territory through brute force intimidation. If other species learned that humans could consistently defeat Corvin warriors despite being smaller and less technologically advanced, it would undermine the entire foundation of Corvin power. They'll attack Earth, Marcus said quietly. They have to, before other species realize that size and strength don't automatically win battles. The conference room doors opened, and High Commander Vexitar emerged with several human officials. His expression was grim as he approached their group. "Daughter," he said formally, "we have much to discuss. Colonel Harrison, your people have impressed many delegates today, but you have also created dangerous enemies." "We're aware of the situation, Commander," Harrison replied. "Our question is whether Thrixian forces would consider a mutual defense alliance." Vexitar's 4 eyes fixed on Marcus. "That depends on several factors. Your fighter here displayed remarkable skill against my daughter, but he also showed troubling knowledge of classified biological information. How did humans obtain detailed data on Thrixian anatomy?" Marcus exchanged glances with his superior officers. "Sir, with respect, we didn't obtain that information through espionage." "Then how?" Vexitar demanded. "Pattern recognition," Marcus replied simply. "Humans evolved on a world where we were prey animals. We survived by learning to read body language, identify weaknesses, and exploit advantages that stronger predators couldn't see. When I fought Commander Zara, I was reading her movements in real time, identifying stress points and vulnerable areas through observation." Colonel Harrison stepped forward. "Commander Vexitar, human combat doctrine is based on adaptation and improvisation rather than overwhelming force. We study our opponents during engagement and adjust our tactics accordingly. It's not intelligence gathering in the traditional sense." Vexitar looked skeptical. "You claim to learn alien anatomy through observation alone?" "Not just anatomy," Marcus said. "Movement patterns, emotional states, tactical preferences, equipment limitations. Humans have to be good at reading other species because we're usually outmatched in direct confrontation." Zara found herself speaking before she could stop herself. "Father, he's telling the truth. During our match, I felt like he was anticipating my attacks before I made them. It wasn't precognition or telepathy. He was reading my muscle tension, eye movements, and breathing patterns." Her father turned his attention to her, and Zara realized she had just revealed more than she intended. "You seem remarkably well informed about this human's capabilities, daughter." The moment of truth had arrived. Zara looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. Taking a deep breath, she made the decision that would define the rest of her life. "Father, I need to inform you of an unprecedented situation. This human has triggered a mating bond response." The silence that followed was absolute. Captain Crix's mandibles hung open in shock. The human officers looked confused, not understanding the significance. High Commander Vexitar's expression went through several stages of disbelief before settling on careful consideration. "That is genetically impossible," he said finally. "Yes, sir. It should be," Zara agreed. "But every biological marker indicates a full bond response. My hormone levels, genetic activation, behavioral patterns, everything confirms compatibility with this individual." "You're saying," Colonel Harrison interjected, "that your daughter has some kind of biological connection with Sergeant Chen?" "More than a connection," Zara explained. "According to Thrixian biology, we are genetically destined partners. perfect mates whose offspring would carry the strongest traits of both bloodlines. Marcus stepped closer to Zara, and she felt the familiar rush of rightness that accompanied his proximity. "Sir," he said to her father, "I don't pretend to understand the science involved, but I know what I feel. When I look at your daughter, everything in me recognizes her as the person I'm supposed to spend my life with." High Commander Vextar studied both of them carefully. As one of the most experienced military leaders in Thrixian history, he was skilled at reading people and situations. "The political implications of this are staggering," he said slowly. "An interspecies mating bond between royal guard and human military could either strengthen diplomatic relations or create massive scandal depending on how it's handled. There's more to consider," Captain Crix added reluctantly. "If humans can trigger mating responses in Thrixians, it suggests genetic compatibility at a level we never imagined possible. The scientific community will demand extensive study." "Which brings us back to the immediate problem," Colonel Harrison pointed out. "Corvin forces won't wait for us to sort out biological mysteries. Intelligence estimates they'll begin their offensive within days." Marcus looked around the group, then made a decision that surprised everyone. "What if we use this situation to our advantage?" "Explain," Vextar commanded. "The Corvins expect humans to be isolated, primitive, easy targets. They don't know about potential alliances with advanced species. If Thrixian forces were to begin joint training exercises with human units, it might give them pause." "Joint training would require close cooperation between our species," Zara realized, following his logic. "Extended cultural exchange, shared facilities, integrated command structures. Which would provide cover for us to explore this unprecedented biological connection," Marcus continued, "while simultaneously presenting a united front against Corvin aggression." Colonel Harrison was nodding thoughtfully. "A formal alliance between Earth and the Thrixian Empire would change the entire balance of power in this sector. The Corvins would have to recalculate their expansion plans." High Commander Vextar remained silent for several minutes, weighing political, military, and personal factors. Finally, he spoke. "The Galactic Council will convene an emergency session tomorrow to address the Corvin threat. I will propose a formal alliance between our species, with joint military exercises beginning immediately." He looked directly at his daughter. "I will also announce your bonding to this human as evidence of the deep connection between our peoples." Zara felt a surge of gratitude and relief. "Father, are you certain?" "The scandal will be manageable," Vextar interrupted, "compared to the strategic advantages of this alliance. Besides," his expression softened slightly, "I have watched you search for your mate for 28 cycles. If the universe has chosen to provide one from an unexpected source, who am I to question cosmic wisdom?" 3 days later, the joint human-Thrixian fleet intercepted the Corvin invasion force at the edge of Earth's solar system. The battle that followed became legendary throughout the galaxy. Corvin ships, designed for overwhelming force against individual targets, found themselves facing combined tactics they couldn't counter. Human strategic flexibility paired with Thrixian raw power created engagement patterns that confused and frustrated the invaders. Zara and Marcus fought side by side, their natural compatibility translating into perfect combat coordination. They seemed to share thoughts and instincts, moving as a single unit with devastating effectiveness. The decisive moment came when Marcus proposed a strategy so audacious that Corvin commanders didn't recognize it until too late. Instead of fighting the massive Corvin dreadnoughts directly, the joint fleet target their support vessels, while human fighters use their small size and maneuverability to plant charges in vulnerable locations. When the dreadnoughts tried to retreat, they discovered their own debris fields had been strategically positioned to trap them. The entire Corvin fleet surrendered within hours, facing complete destruction if they continued fighting. News of the victory spread across the galaxy within days. The Corvin Empire, Defeated by an alliance between an ancient warrior species and newcomers who had achieved space travel only 50 cycles ago, found their reputation for invincibility permanently shattered. More importantly for Zara and Marcus, the battle provided undeniable proof that their bond translated into practical advantages. Military leaders from a dozen species requested meetings to understand how human adaptability could enhance their own combat effectiveness. 6 months later, standing in the gardens of the Thrixian royal palace, Zara and Marcus exchanged vows in a ceremony that combined traditions from both worlds. Representatives from throughout the galaxy attended, marking the beginning of a new era of interspecies cooperation. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if the tournament computer had matched you with a different opponent? Marcus asked, during their first dance as bonded mates. Zara smiled, her violet skin shimmering in the setting sun. I have learned that humans believe in destiny and fate. Perhaps the computer selection was not as random as it appeared. You think the universe conspired to bring us together? Marcus laughed. I think, Zara replied, pulling him closer, that the universe occasionally produces combinations that no one expects, but everyone needs. Humans and Thrixians, strength and adaptability, honor and innovation. Around them, the celebration continued as representatives from dozens of worlds shared food, stories, and hope for a future where differences created strength rather than division. The Corvin threat had been neutralized, but more importantly, two species had discovered that evolution sometimes creates connections that transcend logic, biology, and expectation. In a galaxy full of wonders, perhaps the greatest miracle was that love could bridge any gap, even between the stars themselves. As the evening progressed and the twin moons rose over the palace, Zara and Marcus stood together watching ships from Earth and Thrix prepare for another joint mission. Their bond had begun with a tournament match, but it had become the foundation for a new era of cooperation that would reshape galactic civilization for generations to come. The human fighter had faced the Thrixian warrior and found his destined mate. In doing so, he had also helped both their species discover that the universe was far more interconnected than anyone had imagined. Genetic compatibility, Zara whispered. Mutual attraction that transcends species barriers. Recognition at the biological level that two individuals are perfect matches. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. Zara, Marcus said finally, I think we need to discuss what happened to both of us yesterday when we first met.